Hey guys, I'm Evan with ECS Tuning, and today we're covering rod bearing replacement on a BMW E46 M3. While we're performing this job on an E46, most of the information covered in this video still applies to the S54 powered Z3M and Z4M. So, rod bearings. If you're fluent in BMW, you probably already know about the S54 and its rod bearing issues. Ever since this engine came out, it's kind of been the Achilles heel. BMW has made a few updates over the years, but the problem continues to haunt these cars. With many having covered well over 100,000 miles, rod bearings have basically become a must-do job. Now, the car behind me, my personal M3, shows nearly 200,000 miles. While it had some warranty work early on, there's no proof rod bearings have been done since. So rather than waiting for a spun bearing or a catastrophic engine failure, we're going to get ahead of the issue by swapping out the rod bearings. Now, this job requires time, loads of patience, and you've got to pay attention to the details. But if you're willing to put in the work, it's totally something you can do at home. In this video, I'll take you step by step from teardown to reassembly so you can perform this service with confidence in your own garage. I'll cover all the parts and tools you'll need, what to watch out for, and how to avoid common mistakes. Before we dive in, let's talk parts. So I'm using one of our comprehensive rod bearing service kits, which includes everything I'll need to complete this job. This kit features Turner Motorsport Race Series rod bearings, which are a huge upgrade over the OEM bearing composition. These are standard clearance ACL Duraglide shells that are surface treated by WPC for reduced friction and added durability. They're a solid upgrade for both street and track use. Another crucial component is your connecting rod bolts. Depending on the year of your S54, you may need to pick up a new set. S54 engines produced after the February 03 split have a one-time use M10 by 1.25 connecting rod bolt, so you have to replace them alongside the bearing shells. Since my early production S54 has the reusable M11 by 1.25 hardware, I won't be needing a set. If you're looking to upgrade, ARP is a popular choice. We stock ARP hardware for both early and late applications and even offer them in our rod bearing service kits. Since we'll be draining the engine oil for this job, you'll want to pick up an oil service kit. Our oil service kit includes LL1 compliant Liquid Moly Racetech 10W60 and a high quality OE replacement filter kit from Hengst, as well as a new drain plug and crush washer for a leak-free seal. Since we'll be removing the oil pan to access the rod bearings, you'll need a fresh oil pan gasket, an oil level sensor gasket, an oil pan center cover gasket, and the oil dipstick tube O-ring. We'll also run across a few one-time use fasteners during this job, so we'll need to replace those upon reassembly. We need the 12 bolts for the underbody reinforcement plate, the 4 self-locking nuts that hold the sway bar brackets to the chassis, and the single external torque screw for the steering shaft. Now, to get to the rod bearings, we've got to take off a lot of stuff, and that means there's a bunch of parts you might want to replace while you're in there. These might as well items include spark plugs, ignition coils, accessory belts, and tensioners. Stuff that's probably seen better days on a higher mileage S54. For this being a large DIY, you're going to need a lot of standard tools. We'll call it each size of each fastener as we move through the DIY. However, I wanted to highlight a couple specialty tools that you're going to need to perform this job. In front of me, I have 2 crankshaft sockets. Depending on the year of your S54, your crank bolt might look different. You might need this 4-hole one here or this 32 one here. We also have 2 different torque wrenches. We have a standard torque wrench and we have a torque angle wrench. You'll need this to torque angle your rod bearing bolts. We also have a plastic gauge, which we'll use to check the bearing clearances on our rod bearings after installation. And finally, we have a fan clutch counterhold tool and a fan clutch wrench for removing our fan clutch. First up, we're going to disconnect the battery. This trim piece out of the way. Pop the negative terminal up to the side. Next up, we're going to get the car in the air, remove the front wheels. We're using a lift, but you can easily do this on 4 jack stands. Next up, we need to gain access to the front of the engine. So we'll start by removing the suction hood and the 4 expansion rivets that hold to the chassis. Next up, locate the xenon headlight control unit on the driver's side of the engine bay. You're gonna have 2 connectors here. This boot out of the way, to clip on the bottom, push in, pull out. With those out of the way, there's 3 clips on the side here. Push those in, pop the cover off. We have three 10mm fasteners holding the xenon headlight control unit to the fender well. The third fastener is for the airbox. We'll get that one out of the way as well. With those fasteners out of the way, we can go ahead and get the xenon control unit out of the way. Prepare to remove the airbox. To loosen this hose clamp, we use a flathead screwdriver, or alternatively, you can use a 6mm socket. With the hose clamp loosened up, we can go ahead and disconnect our mass airflow sensor. There's a push clip on each side. And with that out of the way, we can lift up the entire airbox. Should be able to come out in one piece. While we're up here, we can go ahead and get this 10mm cap nut that connects the dipstick to the intake plenum out of the way. Next, using a 6mm Allen, we'll drain the engine oil. While we're waiting for the oil to drain, we have 7 8mm screws that hold the underbody shield to the chassis. Before we move any further, we'll go ahead and put the drain plug back in. There will be some residual oil left in the oil pan, but we'll get it all out when we pull it before the rod bearing service. Next up, we have 12 16mm fasteners that hold the underbody reinforcement plate to the chassis. This thing's pretty heavy, so make sure you have a good hold on it before you zip these last 2 bolts out. Next up, we have 2 T25 screws that hold the lower fan shroud to the radiator. Next up, we need to remove our fan clutch. We'll be reusing these fan clutch removal tools from Schwabin. We've got a long 32mm wrench here. We'll put around the nut, and then we'll use this end to counterhold the bolts on the water pump. At this point, we don't need to get the fan clutch all the way out. We just need to get it loosened up so we can start removing the fan shroud. Don't forget this fan clutch is reverse thread, so you're going to be turning to the right to loosen it instead of to the left. Next up, we have a few rivets that are holding these fan shrouds in. We have this one right here. We can use some panel popper tools for this. You might need pliers if yours are really stuck. And there's another expansion rivet right here. With these 2 rivets out of the way, the passenger side air duct can be lifted up and out of the engine bay. Before we can get our main fan shroud out of the way, we have a couple connectors to remove. We have this AUC sensor up here, which we can just plug and lift out. Then we have this auxiliary fan connector, which we don't actually have to unplug. We just lift it out, move it to the side. We have one more T25 screw to get out of the way. With everything removed, we can now start to unthread the clutch fan. And once that's removed, we can lift out the radiator fan and the fan shroud all at once. Next up, we have a T45 screw that holds this tensioner to the engine. And with a breaker bar, we can loosen the slack on this. And we can slip the belt off and just set it to the side. Next up, we'll be removing the microfilter housing. There are 3 clips there. The lid slides out, as well as your air filter. Now we have 4 T30 screws holding the microfilter housing to the cowl. You should have 4, I only have 3. Now we have some weather stripping to get out of the way. And then get these wires out of here. And the whole piece should just lift up. Next, locate the battery terminal on the passenger side of the engine bay using a 19mm. So that's loosened up. And thread the harness out. Throw the nut back on. And we'll put the harness over on the other side of the bay. Our next step is to remove the spark plugs. Rod bearing replacement can absolutely be done with the spark plugs still installed in the cylinder head, but taking that bit of resistance out makes it easier for us to push up on the connecting rod when we're underneath the engine, and I find it makes it a lot easier to do the job. First up, we'll remove our crankcase ventilation hose. There's 2 clips to push in on the side here. Give it a little wiggle and it should lift up. These are super prone to cracking due to their weak plastic construction, so make sure you pick up a new piece with your connecting rod bearing set. Next up, we have 6 10mm cap nuts that hold the beauty cover to the valve cover. Remove the oil cap, and then the beauty cover can just lift out. Next up, we're gonna get the ignition coils out of the way by unclipping them from their respective harnesses. Once they're unclipped, pull up. They're super tough. Sometimes you can use a screwdriver. For some of these, we'll need to get this harness cover out of the way so that the connectors have enough room to back out of the ignition coils. Next up, we'll get the spark plugs out of here using a 5/8 spark plug socket. Before we go back down below the car, we've gone ahead and installed our Schwaben engine support bar. This thing is adjustable for any width and has this nice hook here, which is adjustable, and it's going to allow us to support the engine from up top. When we go to remove the subframe and the engine mounts, it's not going to fall through the bottom of the car. Next up, we're going to unclip the headlight leveling sensor and plug out of there. Next up, we need to get the subframe, control arms, and steering rack out of the way so we can get to the oil pan and later the rod bearings. Now, if you're looking to save some time, you can totally get away with just lowering the subframe while keeping the control arms and the steering rack attached to the car. However, in order for us to show you the DIY in detail, we're choosing to drop the subframe completely. If you feel like you need more room, you may choose to do so as well. Next up, we're disconnecting the sway bar end links using a 17mm socket. You may need to counter hold the stud on the sway bar end link with a 15mm. Next up, we're going to drop these sway bar brackets. Those 4 nuts out. Kind of rip the sway bar down. It comes right out. Before we move it over to the knuckle, we're going to spray everything over here with a little bit of penetrating oil. This car lived its whole life in the rust belt, and who knows the last time these have been off. Next up, we're removing the tie rod end from the spindle. This is a 19mm nut. every time. With that out of the way, we have 4 16mm bolts that hold the F-cab brackets to the chassis. Up next, we're going to be disconnecting the power steering hoses from the steering rack. We have a 22mm hex right here and a 19mm hex right here. You should have your oil drain handy, as we are going to lose some fluid when we loosen these up. While we're waiting for the power steering fluid to drain, we have to unbolt this lower steering coupler from the steering shaft. It's an E10 external Torx. Next up, we have the 16mm nuts that hold the engine mount to the front subframe. You may need a universal joint for this to circumvent the control arm. Now we'll safely support the front subframe with a pull jack or a transmission jack. Then we'll draw out the 4 18mm bolts holding the subframe to the chassis. It's always good to make sure that you have everything disconnected before you start dropping down the front subframe. For example, I just noticed we still have these power steering lines. You'll have a 10mm nut right here. In my case, I just have a zip tie. So we're going to start with the front bolts. We're going to draw those out slowly, then we'll move on to the rear and kind of walk the whole thing down before it completely loads onto the transmission jack. Oh. Finally, there's one more 22mm that secures the power steering line to the pump. We can remove the lines from the car. So we have two 13mm to remove to separate the pump from the pan. First, we're going to remove this 10mm that holds the oil cooler lines. We have two bolts to hold the front of the power steering pump to the oil filter housing. Another 13mm on this side. Use a pair of pliers to loosen the clamp securing the pump to the reservoir. And with that, we can remove the pump from the car. With the power steering pump out of the way, we almost have easy access to the rod bearings. There's a couple more things we need to do before we get the oil pan out of the way. First up is this 10mm that holds the dipstick tube to the oil pan. Next up, we have the oil level sensor. Squeeze the tabs on the side, unplug. Now there's cable clips securing it to the oil pan. You get a pick in there. Should be able to pop it out like that. Just tuck that to the side for now. Finally, we have the oil drain for the CCV. Just press the two tabs in on the side and pull up. Lastly, we have the drain hose for the Vanos. This is an early car, so it has this rubber hose with a hose clamp. You can use either a flathead or a 6mm to remove that. On later cars, you'll have a stainless braided mesh line, and that'll have a 17mm swivel fitting that you may need to counterhold the nut on the pan for. Have a drain pan ready as a a little bit of oil might come out of this upon removal. At this point, you can go ahead and remove your oil drain plug again, as there's probably some more oil that's settled in the sump. To avoid making a mess, we want that all out of there before we pull the pan. Finally, we're ready to remove the oil pan. Now, there's 28 bolts and there's 4 different sizes, so you want to take special care here to make sure your hardware is organized, because you do not want to mix that up upon reassembly. I'm starting with the 3 M8 by 50 millimeter bolts at the back of the oil pan. These are E10 external Torx. Next, we'll remove the 3 M6 by 25 bolts near the CCV drain. These are 10 millimeter head. Next up, we're removing the 20 M6 by 20 bolts around the perimeter of the pan. Just like the other bolts, these are 10 millimeter. So the 2 bolts at the rear of the sump are actually recessed into the bell housing here. So using a 10 mil and an extension, get up in there. Finally, there's 2 more bolts at the rear of the sump. These are M6 by 95, and they are also 10. With all the bolts removed, we can go ahead and get the pan off. You might need a pry bar. Find this area over here. When removing the pan, be mindful of the oil pump pickup and all the other components. Make sure oil dipstick comes out. With the oil pan off, we can finally see all the connecting rods right here. And at this point, we're only a few steps away from getting to those connecting rod caps. We're going to start with removing the 2 4 millimeters that hold the oil pipe to the oil pump. Next up, we have 2 10 millimeter bolts holding the oil pipes to the main bearing caps. Next up, we have the 17 millimeter for the oil pump nut. It is reverse thread. Just make sure to turn clockwise. You also want to depress the timing chain tensioner. With that out of the way, we can slide the sprocket off of the oil pump. And then kind of work it out of the chain. Like that. Finally, we have 3 6 millimeter Allen screws that hold the oil pump to the block. These are pretty tight, so make sure you have the hex all the way into the fastener before you start putting torque on it. While you're removing this last one, make sure to support the oil pump from below so it doesn't fall on the ground. So before we start pulling caps, let's talk again about connecting rod hardware. As mentioned at the start of this video, your S54 will have either M10 or M11 connecting rod bolts, and this difference is critical. In front of me, I have the early bolts, the late bolts, and a complete set of upgraded hardware from ARP. Let's break down the differences. M11 by 1.25 bolts are used in the early production S54 and fit vehicles manufactured before the February 2003 split. The head on these is 12 point, so make sure you have one on hand for this install. Per BMW, these bolts must be reused and they must be reinstalled in the exact same location from which they were removed. To avoid mixing up the location of your hardware, we recommend marking the head of each bolt using 2 different colored paint pens, one for the intake side and one for the exhaust side. Compared to M10 hardware, the torquing process for these bolts is quite simple. We'll start with a settling torque of 5 Nm, then bump up to 30 Nm for our initial torque, then finally we'll apply 70 degrees of rotation for our torque angle. M10 by 1.25 bolts are used in later production S54s, produced after the February 2003 split. These are E12 torques, and unlike the early hardware, they cannot be reused. These bolts can be yielded a total of 5 times, 3 of which will be consumed during the lengthy torquing sequence, but more on that in a second. In short, this means you must buy a complete new set of M10 hardware with your rod bearings. Thankfully, our Assembled by ECS service kits make this easy by including new bolts for late production fitment, so you don't need to go tracking down part numbers. Another key difference between the early and late hardware is the torquing sequence. Like M11 bolts, we'll start with a settling torque of 5 Nm, move up to the 30 Nm initial torque, and apply 105 degrees of rotation for our torque angle. However, in order to properly yield these bolts, you'll need to loosen each bolt 1 full turn and then repeat the process 2 more times. If you don't fancy reusing your early rod bolts, or if you're looking to avoid the lengthy torque sequence of the later rod bolts, ARP is a popular performance upgrade and an alternative. ARP bolts are far stronger than their OEM counterparts and boast an increased clamp load compared to stock. Unlike factory hardware, these don't require a lengthy torquing procedure, just torque them to 70 foot-pounds and you're done. We offer ARP hardware for both M10 and M11 applications and include them in many of our rod bearing service kits. Our first step, we're going to use a 32mm socket to rotate the crank until we can access each connecting rod cap. That way we can label them with paint. Make sure you're turning clockwise here. Right now I'm marking the connecting rod bolts and caps with paint because the bolts need to go back exactly where they are and the caps are directional, so it's important for us to remember exactly where they go. So according to BMW TIS, the rod bolts should be accessed in the following order: 1 and 6, 3 and 4, and then 2 and 5. So we're going to start by getting 1 and 6 to the bottom of their stroke so we can access them. So we're going to start by getting the cap off of cylinder number 1. As mentioned prior, this is an early car, so we have 12mm hardware. I cannot understate the importance of organizing your hardware. Over here I have a tool tray I'm going to use to keep my exhaust side bolts and intake side bolts separated. Once the bolts are removed, obviously the cap's not just gonna fall out. So supporting it from the bottom is not to drop it. Give it a couple taps with a rubber mallet. And there we go. So with our cap removed, you can go ahead and push that old bearing out. Kind of push on the side right here. And then once it rotates, kind of pluck it out like that. I'm using the organizer from our online DIY. This is the cylinder number 1 bottom bearing. So I'm going to set it right here. So to access the upper rod bearing, we're going to push up on the rod and move it to the side so it can kind of circumvent the crankshaft. The TIS suggests you use a piece of fiber-free cardboard to protect the journal. I'm using a section of pig mat that I cut to the dimensions in the TIS. Kind of push up. Shouldn't be much resistance. Once it's above there, you can thread your piece of pig mat or cardboard through and drape it over the crankshaft. Now that it's over, we can pull down. Just use caution. Make sure you're not contacting anything. And it's accessible right there. So we can use the same process as the bottom, which is push it to the side, pull out. This is our upper bearing shell. Not looking too bad, honestly. Set that in our organizer and move on to the next one. So on the surface of the bearing here, we can actually see the WPC treatment. It's essentially just shot peening, but with much finer particles. It kind of gives the surface that smooth and flat finish, which is not only going to help with durability, but it also is going to help oil flow. So like I said at the start of this video, great upgrade for your street car or your track car. With all the old bearings out, we can start the process of putting the new ones in. First step to that, we're going to clean the bearing surface with a clean microfiber towel. Now we'll take one of our new Turner WPC Race Series rod bearings, and installation is pretty simple on these. We're just going to find the tang, which is this piece right here. It needs to line up in this notch right here. Pretty simple. Just push it up in there, and once you're aligned in that notch, it should self-locate. There you go. Move it back over the journal. It takes a little bit of finesse. Once it's back over the journal, you can pull out that piece of either cardboard or a pig mat in my case, and lower it back onto the journal. There you go. Just like the top one, we're going to clean the bottom cap with the microfiber. Doesn't have to be perfect. Then we'll take our new bearing shell, and again we'll find the tang, and we'll find the notch on the cap. Line that up. Push in until everything's aligned. Perfect. I forgot to mention it before dropping the connecting rod back down, but make sure you clean the actual journal itself with a microfiber, as that's necessary for our Plastigauge process, which is the next step. It's pretty simple to use. The Plastigauge kit includes MPG1 and MPR1. We only need MPG1 in this case. Inside the package, you'll find a thin strip of plastic. Now we're going to cut the proper length for our bearing. I'm going to place that length right here at the bottom of the shell. Once this is torqued to spec, it'll squish down. We'll be able to use the packaging as a ruler to compare the squish down size to this chart. That'll tell us the exact clearance of the bearing. Make sure your Plastigauge is still in the middle there, and make sure your directional marking is where you had it before. For me, that's the intake side. Toss it back up into place. Grab screw. Make sure to use the exact same screw that was removed. So the torquing sequence varies on whether you have M10 bolts or M11 bolts, but the first two steps are the same for both pieces of hardware. So we're going to start with our settling torque of 5 Newton meters. It's really not much at all, basically just hand tight. Next we have our initial torque, which is 30 Newton meters. Finally, we have our torque angle, which is 70 degrees for these early M11 bolts, and it's going to be 105 degrees for the late M10 bolts. It's important to do this in one single stroke, so make sure you have enough room. Now that our torque sequence is complete, we'll need to pop this rod cap back off and check our Plastigauge. You can see our Plastigauge smushed into the crankshaft journal here. Now we'll use the included clearance range. As you can see here, it's looking about 51 thou. So that is right in the middle of our range, which is 30 thousandths to 70 thousandths. So this bearing is good to go. All we need to do is clean off the plastic gauge from the journal and then throw the assembly lube on and redo the torquing sequence. I'm using some brake cleaner on a lint-free towel to get that plastic gauge off of the journal. Don't forget to clean the plastic gauge off of the lower bearing. Plastic gauge is oil soluble, so you don't have to worry if there's a little bit on there, but for my sake, I like to get it all off there. We're gonna pop that top bearing back off. Use our strip of pigment. Now we can get our assembly lube and we can lubricate that top bearing. Also want to throw some assembly lube onto the journal itself. This stuff is super sticky. You really can't have too much of it. It's going to help on initial startup, but beyond that, it'll all get washed away. Finally, we'll lubricate our bottom shell. Once again, you can never have too much of this stuff. Now we'll rerun our torque sequence and then we're ready to move on to the next bearing. All the rod bearings are in. Finally, we can start moving towards reassembly. We're going to start with the oil pump and these 3 6mm Allen screws. With the bolts snug down, we can go ahead and torque them to 17 foot-pounds. Next up, we're reinstalling the oil pump sprocket. Thread it over into the chain. Then align the teeth like so. Before we throw the nut back on, we're going to put a small drop of red Loctite on the threads. This is going to prevent the oil pump nut from backing out. Remember, this is reverse thread. So we're going to turn counterclockwise to tighten. We're going to torque the 17mm nut down to 18.4 foot-pounds. Before we put the oil pickup tube back on, we have an O-ring to replace right here on the end. Just get a pick under there. There we go. First, we'll install the rear oil pickup. Slide the O-ring into the oil pump. Next is the return tube. There's no gasket here. It's a machine service on each side. The two 10mm for the rear pickup are torqued to 10 Newton meters. There's no torque spec for the return tube, so we're just going to go hand tight. Before we can put the oil pan back in the car, we gotta prep it for install. There's a couple things you'll need to remove. I've gone ahead and removed the screen for the rear pickup and the oil level sensor. You can just replace the O-ring on the oil level sensor if you want. Our kit includes that. Since my oil level sensor is old, I'm going to go ahead and replace it with this new one from Bremen Parts. Go ahead and install our oil level sensor. The bolts stuck down, we can go ahead and torque them to 9 Newton meters. While we have the pan out, you can go ahead and throw your drain plug in. Torque this to 25 Newton meters. We go ahead and install our new O-ring for the dipstick tube. Before we put the pan back on the engine, we're going to clean the mating surface here. Pull your gasket off if you haven't already, and you'll see left behind some remnants. We'll go ahead and get all that off with a Scotch-Brite, a razor blade, and a little bit of brake clean. With the pan prepped and the surface all cleaned up, we only have one thing left to do, and that's to apply RTV right here where the main seal plate meets the engine block and the front timing cover case meets the engine block. This will make them seal well when that pan goes on. Our RTV has been applied. We can go ahead and lift the pan back up into place. Now that we have the pan in place, I can go ahead and cut the zip ties that I used to keep the gasket on there while we were hoisting the pan into place. Now that we have the pan in place, we can start threading in the first of our bolts. I'm going to be starting with the M6x20 that go around the perimeter of the pan. Just hand tight for now, and we'll torque them with the rest of the bolts once we get those installed as well. Next up, we're installing the M6x25 bolts. These are right at the rear of the pan near the dipstick. Now we'll thread in the two longest M6x95 screws here at the rear. Finally, we have the three M8x50 E-Torx screws that thread in at the rear of the bell housing. We'll torque the three E10s at the rear of the pan to 22 Newton meters or 16 foot-pounds. The two bolts at the rear of the pan will be torqued to 12 Newton meters or 8.9 foot-pounds. All the bolts around the perimeter of the pan will be 10 Newton meters or 7.9 foot-pounds. Now that our bolts are torqued down, we got a couple more things to do here to wrap up the pan. First off, we'll reconnect our CCV return. This clips in there. Now we have the wiring harness for the oil level sensor. Again, this just clips in, and then we'll route the wiring back into that clip. Finally, we can reinsert our oil dipstick. You might find that some lubrication is needed to get it to slide in past that new O-ring. Finally, we have this bracket that holds the dipstick tube into place. Now we'll reconnect the Vanos return pipe here. Like I mentioned earlier, on later S54s, this is a 17mm swivel. On early S54s like mine, we'll just tighten down this worm gear clamp with a 6mm socket. Next up, we're reinstalling the oil strainer at the rear of the pan. You can choose to install this before you put the pan back on the car, but it does make it easier to route the rear pickup into the pan. Held to the pan by 6 10mm screws. They are torqued to 9 Nm or 6.5 foot-pounds. Next up, we're reinstalling the power steering pump. We're going to start with the 2 long bolts up top first. Next, we'll reinstall the power steering pump bracket. There's one shorter bolt down here, and then there's 2 long ones up here. We have one last bolt holding the oil cooler lines to the power steering pump bracket. There's no torque spec for this, so we're just going to go hand tight. The 3 bolts at the rear of the pump are all torqued to 23 Nm or 17 foot-pounds. The 2 bolts at the front of the power steering pump are going to be 12 Nm or 9 foot-pounds. Next up, we'll reinstall the feed hose for the power steering pump. With everything installed, we're ready to put the subframe back in the car. I got Tali here with me to help me hoist it up. We're using a pull jack, but if you're in your home garage, you can use a floor jack. Our subframe bolts get torqued to 110 Nm or 81 foot-pounds. Finally have the column onto the rack. We're going to torque our new pinch bolts to 22 Nm or 16 foot-pounds. Ball joint to knuckle, we're going to torque this nut to 65 Nm or 48 foot-pounds. Our F-cab bolts get torqued to 59 Nm or 44 foot-pounds. Next, we're going to torque down our outer tie rods. I have some Turner bump steer adjustables on here. These get torqued to 100 Nm or 75 foot-pounds. If you have factory outer tie rods, those will get torqued to 65 Nm or 48 foot-pounds. We have a few more power steering lines to attach. This one at the rack will go to 40 Nm or 30 foot-pounds. This one at the pump will get torqued to 35 Nm or 26 foot-pounds. The nuts that hold the sway bar bracket to the frame rail will get torqued to 22 Nm or 16 foot-pounds. Next up, we'll torque the sway bar end link to the sway bar. This torque spec for this is 65 Nm or 48 foot-pounds. Next up, we'll torque our engine mount nuts to 45 Nm or 33 foot-pounds. With everything put back together underneath, we can move back up top. I removed the engine support brace, and we're going to start by reinstalling the spark plugs. Spark plugs will get torqued to 25 Nm or 18 foot-pounds. Next up, we'll pop our ignition coils back in. Since we drained our power steering fluid earlier, we're going to fill it back up. We're using Liqui Moly Top Tech ATF 1200. Next, we're going to remove our old oil filter. Go ahead and disconnect your throttle position sensor. So our Hanks filter kit comes with 3 washers and the big O-ring for the cap. We use a pick to get the small washer off the bottom. Throw our new washer on there. Next up is our crush washer. Slide that off. One goes on. Install our O-ring in the cap. And we're ready to reinstall our oil filter. Our oil filter housing bolt is going to get torqued to 24 foot-pounds or 32 Newton-meters. Put our throttle position sensor back in. Now that our oil filter is changed, we're ready to fill it up with oil. We're going to be using Liqui Moly Race Tech Synth Oil GT1 10W60. So standard S54 oil capacity is 5.5 liters, but since we went ahead and cleaned the pan and got all the oil out of the system, it's going to be a lot closer to 6 liters. Our oil service / inspection 1 kit includes 6 liters of Liqui Moly oil, but if I were you, I'd go ahead and order an extra liter just in case you need it. Before we get the car started, it's a good idea to prime the oil system. I'm going to do that by removing the fuel pump relay and cranking it until we see the oil pressure light go out. Fuel pump relay on the M3 is in the trunk. If you have a convertible, it's behind the rear seat. While we're back here, we can go ahead and reconnect our battery. Use a 10mm wrench to snug it down. Before we get in the car and start it up, I've gone ahead and got the car off the ground a little bit. That way we can turn the wheel left and right, get the power steering fluid circulated through the system. If you didn't remove your power steering pump, obviously you don't need to do this. There's a couple things I'm going to watch for once I get in the car. When I crank it, I want to see that red oil pressure light go out, meaning that the oil has circulated throughout the engine and we're good to start. After that, I'll throw the fuel pump relay back in and we'll get this thing started up. Now that we've given it a couple cranks, I'm going to check the oil again, see if we need to top it up now that it's circulated. Looks like we're good. Got our fuel pump relay back in. Finally going to start the car. Oil pressure light went out. Right now I'm listening for any weird sounds from the engine. Everything seems to sound all right. Not hearing anything out of the ordinary. Checking for leaks underneath the car. We just want to make sure that the car sounds healthy after all this extensive work. Looks like we're good. We let the car run for about a minute or so. We're going to shut it off now and check oil level again. And as you can see, all that oil was circulated and we are a bit low despite having added 6 liters. We're going to top it up a little more, make sure we're in the middle, and then we're going to let it get to operating temperature and then we'll check it again. Now that we've verified there are no leaks after our first start, we can go ahead and reinstall our thrust plate. There are 12 bolts that hold this to the underside of the car. We're gonna snug them down to 59 Newton meters or 43 foot-pounds, and we'll follow that with 90 degrees of angle. Once you reinstall your thrust plate and your belly pan, your rod bearing installation is complete. Links to the specialty tools and parts we used are down in the description below. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more enthusiast content.